My name is Sanford Riley, Dr. Sanford Riley, I guess, at the University of Winnipeg. I am the Chancellor Emeritus of the university and the founding chairman of the board of the University of Winnipeg Foundation. I started in 2002, and I've been doing this job now for 21 years. The genesis of the foundation was during the years that I was Chancellor of the university. There were some very significant challenges for the institution. Most specifically, there was a governance crisis involving the then president of the university, Dr. Connie Rook, and her board. And at the end of that crisis, the result of which was a wholesale change at the board level and the departure of Dr. Rook, I ended up being much more engaged in the affairs of the university. I went from being the titular head of the university to becoming the de facto head of the university for a period of 6 months before Patrick Dean stepped up and became the acting president. And during that period, it became apparent to me that the university did not have a great connection to the rest of the community, and particularly on fundraising. It had never really run a significant capital campaign, and the story that I remember most vividly was of a graduate by the name of Doug Leatherdale, who came to the university. He lived in Minneapolis, probably very successful man financially and in every other way, a huge supporter of communities in Minneapolis where he now lived, but also in Winnipeg, because he'd been a graduate of the University of Winnipeg, stayed at Wesley Hall when he was a young man. And Doug came to the university early in the 2000s and tried to make a donation, and no one knew what to do with it. They didn't have a clue, and he wanted to give them, I think, $25,000. So Doug left and went, and he was visiting a friend of mine named Greg Hansen, who was then the chief executive officer of Wawanesa, and he told Greg this story. Greg promptly phoned Janet Walker, who was at that stage working at the university as a consultant. And Janet called me and said, what do we do? First of all, she got a hold of Doug and made sure he made his donation. And that led to a discussion with Janet, who was the consultant, and she came up with the idea of a foundation.
My name is Janet Walker, and I'm a member of the class of 1978. The idea of a public foundation dedicated to the University of Winnipeg was so innovative. It began to cause us to talk boldly about these possibilities. So Sandy Riley encouraged me to bicycle the idea around among faculty, among administration, among alumni. And this was a really great opportunity to talk about the assets and the hope that could be connected to establishing something that was focused and dedicated to the University of Winnipeg. So I worked with vice presidents. There were 3 at the time, and they were fabulous, including Patrick Dean. Doctors Duckworth and Bullman were emeritus members of our community, and they were really helpful. We did a lot of work with finance and legal and the committees of the Board of Regents, all of whom made really good suggestions. And I was the scribe during this period. I took down the notes of people's ideas, and we were able to incorporate so many of these great ideas and suggestions. This was truly a team effort. And it was such an honor to be a part of this university at a time where you could see that it still had hope.
So we decided to set up a foundation that would be a place, 2 things. First of all, it would be a place where we could attract successful graduates who were interested in the success of the university, who had really benefited from their years at the University of Winnipeg, to come and support the university, to be in constant contact with the leadership of the university, but also to play a role in supporting the university as its financial requirements developed. And everybody knows that universities, they get most of their operating funding from government and tuition fees, but it really relies on donors, primarily successful graduates of the institution and corporations who believe in the importance of the institution, to provide capital for major projects. So that was the genesis. I remember After we decided we should do this, I went down. The first thing we had to do was find a CEO to lead it, and that was Susan Thompson, who was the former mayor of Winnipeg.
Hello, my name is Susan Thompson, and I'm the founding president and CEO of the University of Winnipeg Foundation starting in 2003, which, now that we're in 2023, celebrates 20 years. 20 years as the University of Winnipeg Foundation. The state of the University of Winnipeg, when I started as the president and the CEO, had many challenging, is a polite word, situations. First of all, we always start with finance. So the situation at the University of Winnipeg in 2003 was there was a significant discussion, might be the right word, about the university's pension fund. And as I recall, there was a $10 million shortfall happening with the University of Winnipeg's pension fund. So think about that. That created the dynamics of significant unrest within the faculty and staff, significant challenges in the relationship with the province of Manitoba. All kinds of dynamics were occurring, and they weren't happy ones. So that's one aspect. Then on the funding of the university by the province of Manitoba, there was a very unhappy situation going on that the University of Winnipeg had for years been talking about how the formula to fund the University of Winnipeg was not fair. It was not the same formula given to the University of Manitoba, and therefore the University of Winnipeg was feeling shortchanged. So that was the first challenge or dynamic, was on the pension fund and the funding. Then, when I arrived for my very first day at the University of Winnipeg Foundation, we were located up in Wesley Hall. I'm walking up the front walk, and all of a sudden I look up, and here's this big green net across Wesley Hall, and the green net is there because the facade of Wesley Hall is crumbling. So think about that in terms of image. You want to raise money for a university, and the first thing you see is a building that's crumbling, and they have a green net up to protect people from all the stones falling off. So it was an image thing. And so that was a context that was not good. It wasn't good. And then I had my meeting with the Senior Vice President, Stephen Willits, of Finance of the university. And in it, he said, welcome, and by the way, we're $100 million short on infrastructure money, welcome. Well, does that help? Does that give you the picture? And then, in order to finance the establishment of the University of Winnipeg Foundation and pay the staff, Premier Dewar had donated or granted $14 million to the University of Winnipeg to fix the facade, and they hadn't been able to get going on it, so he allowed us to collect interest. So that interest on the $14 million was what our funding was for me to try and hire staff. So precarious, challenging, not great. It was, one was walking into a myriad of opportunities, to say the least. So the initial conversation with Sandy Riley when he called me was, Susan, he said, I would like you to be our founding president and CEO, and here's what I want to talk to you about. It will involve changing a culture. And when I say that, what does it mean to you? And here's what it meant. We are a liberal arts university, and we were always funded by the parishes, and originally by the parishes of the various churches around Manitoba, which is very heartwarming. Dr. Duckworth always used to say, this University of Winnipeg, which was previously United College and all of that, was raised, and the money was raised from the parishes, and it was built. And Dr. Duckworth would then end with no government money. So stop and think about over 100 years ago, all the parishes around Manitoba and individual donors gave enough money to build this university and no government funding. So the culture then shifted, that there was support from the church, the United Church of Canada, but also from the province of Manitoba and the federal government in certain circumstances. But private money, even though we had donors, there had been no significant acceptance and understanding in 2003 that in order for our university to succeed, we absolutely needed private funding. And I remember my first presentation at the Board of Regents at the University of Winnipeg, and we went in to explain. They had approved the foundation. We went in to introduce ourselves and explain it. But I think that Board of Regents, if I remember correctly, is 22 or 24 members. It's a huge number of people to be the governing body. And there are factions, and in one of the factions, they were adamantly against any dirty corporate money or any private funders who could influence the university, and so it was, in my opinion, a bad attitude right away. And so I just stood there and I said, fine, we need to raise approximately $25 million for our university, and if you wish to write me a check right now, 25 million bucks, I'll leave and we won't need a foundation. But if you can't, then I look forward to your support, because this is our university and we need private money. So it was about changing a culture. And I'm very happy to say that after many, many years, we got 90% support of the faculty and staff. We got huge support from the student services and of course from the senior administration, as well as private donors and corporations. But that took years. So it was first and foremost to change the culture, and that took work. And then Sandy went, I want you because you have vision. This was like building a business from scratch. And when you're doing that, you need vision. You can have all the technical expertise and the lawyers and the accountants and everything like that, but you need passion and you need vision. And Sandy went, you have it, and that's one of the reasons I want you. And he said, plus you have a can-do attitude. And then on top of that, he wanted someone who could, to quote him, withstand the pushback that would occur from within the university community and lead without fear. And that's me. I'm fearless. And I have a passion that if I think something needs to be done, I'm fearless. So it was like a startup business, and that was my immediate role and priority, was to establish this foundation. And along with all of that came to get the proper funding, to hire the staff, to get the board on board. We didn't have all the board members, so we had to get, because our first board meeting, we got established in early spring of 2003. Our first board meeting was in June of 2003, so bylaws, to get all the mission, the vision, the strategic plan, everything ready for June was unbelievable, and 3 staff. And so those were the initial priorities. Fundraising is an art and a science, and you've got to learn that. And in order to produce what the university needed, we needed a machine. And really, when you do establish a foundation, you do need about 5 years to get it up and running and established and all of this. We were given a matter of months because in the first board meeting, we had what I consider to be a stellar board. It set the bar for the rest of the city. It made people go, oh, the university, do you see who's on that board? That board is 10-star. It's incredible. And so we had to do board orientation, etc. And by the second meeting of 2003 in September, we were doing an orientation for the board. And then between Bob Kosminski and Sandy Riley and Leonard Asper, I'm not too sure what happened, because Janet Walker and I were doing a very excellent presentation about, you know, maybe we would be looking at a campaign of around maybe 11 million or 15 million or something like this. And all of a sudden, Leonard Asper stands up, takes his suit jacket off, rolls his sleeves up, undoes his tie, and he goes, "I'm not here for the ordinary, I'm here for the extraordinary." And I'm looking at him going, well, thank you. And then he says, no, we're not doing, U of M has just done this hundreds of millions of dollar campaign, and no, we can do 25 million. And then I think Bob Kosminski went, well, maybe we can do 30. And I'm looking at Sandy Riley going, just a minute. I mean, we're not 6 months old here.
Well, in the early years of the foundation, we really had to determine what it was we were going to do. We had no money. The foundation literally was operating on the basis of the goodwill of the university, which was funding our operations. There was a very small $4 million endowment fund that kicked off some interest, but basically the university was funding about $1.5 million a year to the foundation. And we had, at the same time that we were we were trying to find our way in terms of what we would do, we had to basically change the culture of the institution to being one where fundraising from the private graduate sector and the graduates was something that people accepted as being part of the university's mandate. For the longest time, people thought about, when you talk to graduates, you were basically creating friends of the university. Well, that's important, obviously. You want them to recommend the university to their kids and to their acquaintances. And you want them to be very supportive of the university and their experience of the university when they talk to governments and others in the community. But fundamentally, you also want them to recognize that the institution, in order for it to continue to develop and grow, needs financial support. And that was a culture that didn't really exist. As I said earlier, there was no capital campaign history. Very small endowment fund, very little knowledge of who the graduates were. Susan and I and Janet had to basically route around through old yearbooks to see, oh yeah, that person went here. They would be a good board member. So that really was, but we got through that, and we got, Jim McDonald was a really key director because he was such an advocate for the collegiate.